What if the wisest man who ever lived proved that wisdom alone is not enough to guarantee a fulfilled life? That sounds contradictory, maybe even uncomfortable, but the Bible does not hide this tension. The biblical story of Solomon is not a fairy tale about constant success. It is a raw, honest journey about beginnings filled with wisdom and endings marked by warning. Power, wealth, pleasure, knowledge. Solomon had it all, and yet his story confronts us with a deeper question. Where does life truly lose its meaning, and where does it finally find it? This is not just ancient history. It is a mirror held up to your own choices today. As we walk through these lessons from Solomon's life, you may find yourself challenged, encouraged, and even unsettled in the best possible way. Because this is not content for curiosity, but for transformation. If you desire deeper biblical insight, practical wisdom for real life, and reflections that go beyond the surface, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. And stay with me, because one of these lessons may speak directly to your heart in a way you did not expect. The first lesson we learn about Solomon is that true wisdom is born when the heart bows before God. The biblical story reveals a king who begins by recognizing his limits, not by displaying strength. The Bible teaches that God does not guide those who believe they are self-sufficient, but those who admit their need for direction. When you understand this, you realize that wisdom is not about knowing everything, but about knowing whom to turn to. It is at this point that life begins to find its true direction. Solomon presents himself before God with a teachable heart, fully aware of the responsibility placed upon him. The Bible records his words clearly and profoundly. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. First Book of Kings, chapter 3, verse 7. This confession reveals spiritual maturity. God moves where genuine humility is found. Instead of asking for personal advantage, Solomon asks for discernment to govern rightly. The biblical account shows that this request was neither vague nor selfish, but aligned with God's will. Scripture declares, "Give your servant therefore an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil." First Book of Kings, chapter 3, verse 9. An understanding heart always precedes wise decisions. This request teaches that important decisions should not be born out of haste, but out of prayer. The Bible shows that God is pleased when a person pauses before acting. When you pray, the heart slows down and the mind becomes aligned. The biblical story of Solomon makes it clear that divine guidance prevents crooked paths. Those who learn to wait tend to stumble less. Seeking wisdom from God does not only change outward choices, but transforms the inner life. Scripture reveals that discernment shapes character before producing visible results. Solomon began his reign with balance because he began with sincere prayer. When God is consulted at the beginning, he sustains the entire process. This foundation prepares the heart to understand what truly matters. The second lesson we learn about Solomon is that wisdom is worth more than any material wealth. The Bible does not soften this truth. It states clearly that wisdom surpasses silver, gold, and anything one might desire. In Proverbs it is written, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gains understanding. For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain better than gold." Book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 13 and 14. This directly confronts human priorities. The biblical narrative shows that God added riches to Solomon only after he chose the right priorities. Scripture teaches that order matters. When the spiritual comes first, the material finds its proper place. The issue is not owning things, but being owned by them. Wisdom keeps the heart properly aligned. Without spiritual discernment, even great achievements become empty. The Bible reveals that the human soul is not satisfied by accumulation, but by meaning. Solomon had access to everything, yet understood that only God's wisdom sustains the soul. The biblical story makes it clear that wealth without purpose does not produce fulfillment. A misaligned heart is always restless. The pursuit of wisdom requires consistency, not isolated moments. Scripture shows that wisdom must be desired, sought, and practiced daily. Reading Proverbs, meditating on the Word, and living out divine principles keep the heart sensitive. Wisdom is not stored information, but lived truth. It reveals itself in everyday choices. This strong beginning in Solomon's biblical story leads to an essential reflection. Even those who start well must guard their hearts. The Bible prepares the reader to understand that the greatest danger does not come from outside, but from within. When priorities begin to blur, risk grows silently. And it is precisely this divided heart that the next topic begins to expose. The third lesson we learn about Solomon is that great falls almost never begin abruptly. They are born from small compromises made in the silence of the heart. The biblical story shows that Solomon did not abandon God all at once, but drifted away little by little. The Bible teaches that danger rarely appears as something obviously wrong. More often, it comes disguised as something acceptable. When small choices are not guarded, they shape major downfalls. The biblical text reveals that Solomon allowed influences contrary to God's will to enter his life without immediate resistance. Scripture states, "When Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God." First Book of Kings, chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. The heart is not lost suddenly, it is distracted first. That is how spiritual drift begins. This part of the biblical narrative warns that what seems small today can become dominant tomorrow. The Bible teaches that unguarded compromises create habits, and habits form paths. When sin is no longer treated as an exception, it becomes normal. Solomon, even with great wisdom, underestimated this process. And Scripture makes it clear that wisdom without vigilance is not enough. A divided heart always tries to negotiate with the truth. The Bible shows that Solomon maintained an appearance of faith while compromising his loyalty. This reveals a deep spiritual principle. There is no neutrality when it comes to God. The biblical story teaches that either the heart is whole or it has already begun to fracture. Small daily departures produce great spiritual distances. This lesson prepares the ground for something even more challenging: the call to total faithfulness. The Bible does not invite people to partial love, but to complete devotion. And that is exactly what the next truth confronts directly and deeply. The fourth lesson we learn about Solomon is that loving God requires exclusive devotion of the heart. Scripture does not present love for God as an abstract feeling, but as total surrender. It is written, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 5. Divided love was never God's design. The biblical story of Solomon shows that the issue was not merely loving other things, but loving God less than he deserved. The Bible teaches that God does not accept competition within the human heart. When other priorities take the center, God is pushed to the margins. And whenever that happens, spiritual imbalance sets in. Faithfulness is not momentary intensity, it is daily consistency. Loving God fully requires constant evaluation of priorities. Scripture calls the heart to be examined, not merely stirred by emotion. Solomon lost focus not because he lacked knowledge of the truth, but because he failed to live it fully. The biblical narrative shows that knowledge without obedience produces spiritual inconsistency. The heart begins to divide when practice no longer matches belief. This call to total faithfulness reveals that God desires more than religious actions. He wants the center of the heart. The Bible shows that where love is, devotion will follow. Solomon began with a whole heart, but ended with fragmented affections. This raises a quiet warning. No one is immune to spiritual distraction. When love for God ceases to be the central axis of life, other things take that place without asking permission. The biblical story prepares the reader to see that the greatest danger is not losing things, but losing meaning. And it is precisely this emptiness that begins to surface when human achievements take the place of God, a theme the next topic explores with depth and truth. The fifth lesson we learn about Solomon is that success, when disconnected from God, does not satisfy the soul. The biblical story presents a man who achieved everything many people dream of: power, recognition, influence, and abundance. Even so, the Bible records a hard and honest diagnosis of the human experience when God is not at the center. It is written, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun?" Book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Achievement without purpose produces inner exhaustion. Solomon speaks not as someone frustrated for failing to achieve, but as someone who achieved everything and discovered its limits. Scripture reveals that the problem is not work or accomplishment, but the expectation placed upon them. When the heart expects achievements to fill what only God can fill, disappointment is inevitable. The biblical narrative teaches that outward success does not guarantee inward fullness. Emptiness can exist even in abundance. This teaching directly confronts the logic of the world. The Bible shows that it is possible to grow outwardly while shrinking inwardly. Solomon understood that when God is not the ultimate end, everything else becomes a means without meaning. Life turns into a sequence of goals achieved and satisfaction postponed. The heart works constantly, but rarely rests. And this weariness is not physical, it is spiritual. The biblical story reveals that success becomes a burden when it loses alignment with eternal purpose. Scripture does not condemn achievement, but warns against turning it into a source of identity. When personal worth is measured by productivity, the soul becomes enslaved to performance. Solomon realized that without God, even the extraordinary quickly becomes ordinary. Nothing impresses for long. This silent emptiness prepares the heart for an even deeper reflection on pleasure and meaning. The Bible shows that when success fails to satisfy, people often attempt to compensate by chasing pleasure. And it is precisely here that the next lesson becomes even more revealing. The sixth lesson we learn about Solomon is that momentary pleasure does not build lasting meaning. The biblical account shows that Solomon allowed himself to experience everything his eyes desired. He withheld nothing from himself. Yet Scripture records his conclusion: "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. And behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind." Book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. Pleasure without purpose fades quickly. The Bible reveals that the issue with pleasure is not feeling it, but depending on it. Solomon realized that joy rooted only in external stimuli cannot sustain the heart. Pleasure demands repetition, greater intensity, and immediate results. When it becomes the center of pursuit, emptiness merely changes its form. The biblical story shows that joy without God is always temporary. This truth confronts the culture of immediacy. Scripture teaches that what satisfies for a moment cannot sustain a lifetime. Solomon understood that pleasure is not the same as fulfillment. The human heart was created for something deeper than passing sensations. When that depth is ignored, the soul becomes restless. The biblical narrative reveals that only God offers joy with roots, not just effects. Solomon experienced the extremes in order to teach this truth to future generations. The Bible shows that meaning is not born from excess, but from alignment with the Creator. Where God does not rule, nothing lasts. Pleasure passes, but emptiness remains. This honest diagnosis from Solomon does not end in despair, but in learning. Scripture leads the reader to understand that leadership, influence, and choices carry spiritual weight. When emptiness is recognized, the responsibility to live differently emerges. And it is precisely this call to spiritual responsibility that the next topic begins to reveal with even greater clarity. The seventh lesson we learn about Solomon is that great responsibilities require great reverence for God. The biblical story shows that the wisdom given to Solomon was not merely intellectual, but spiritual, recognized by the entire nation. Scripture records that the people perceived something different in his leadership, something that came from God. It is written, "All Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice." First Book of Kings, chapter 3, verse 28. Leadership without reverence is authority without direction. The Bible makes it clear that spiritual authority does not come from position, but from reverence. Solomon was respected because his decisions reflected God's character. The biblical narrative teaches that the greater the influence, the greater the dependence on the Lord must be. Leadership is not a license for spiritual independence, but a call to responsibility. When reverence is lost, leadership becomes dangerous. This lesson confronts the idea that leadership is about control. Scripture shows that leadership is service under God's direction. Solomon was raised to judge with justice, not to satisfy personal interests. When God is removed from the center, leadership begins to serve the ego. The fear of the Lord keeps the heart properly aligned. The biblical story reveals that decisions made without reverence for God affect far more than the decision maker. The Bible teaches that leadership carries collective weight. The behavior of those who lead shapes environments, cultures, and destinies. Solomon began his reign with wisdom, but when he drifted from reverence, the consequences spread. Every leader leaves a mark. This principle prepares the heart to understand that spiritual choices are never merely personal. Scripture shows that influence multiplies, and this is precisely what the next lesson develops in a clear and challenging way. The eighth lesson we learn about Solomon is that spiritual influence reaches across generations. The biblical narrative reveals that Solomon's spiritual decisions affected not only his own life, but the future of the kingdom. Scripture records God's response to his turning away. "Since this has been your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you." First Book of Kings, chapter 11, verses 9 through 13. The impact of a leader's heart extends beyond the present. The Bible teaches that spiritual choices build legacies, whether good or harmful. Solomon did not lose everything immediately, but he left consequences for those who came after him. The biblical story shows that children often reap decisions they did not make. This reveals the seriousness of spiritual influence. What is lived today echoes tomorrow. This truth confronts the idea that faith is merely personal. Scripture shows that spirituality, lived quietly, shapes the environment around it. Solomon influenced an entire nation, for better and for worse. When spiritual leaders fail, many suffer. Influence is never neutral. The biblical narrative makes it clear that God observes not only isolated actions, but the direction of the heart over time. Solomon started well, but did not finish with the same spiritual vigilance. Scripture teaches that consistency matters more than enthusiastic beginnings. Generational impact depends on sustained faithfulness. This lesson leads the reader to an unavoidable reflection. What is being built spiritually today will affect tomorrow. The Bible shows that life does not end with the individual. And when this weight is understood, the need to seek a deeper meaning for existence emerges exactly what the next topic begins to reveal. The ninth lesson we learn about Solomon is that fearing God is the foundation of a truly fulfilled life. The Bible makes this explicit by teaching that the fear of the Lord is not terror, but deep reverence and recognition of who God is. The biblical story shows that Solomon understood wisdom begins when God occupies his rightful place. It is written, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Book of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 7. Without this foundation, everything becomes unstable. The fear of God brings order to life from within. Scripture teaches that when God is honored, decisions gain coherence. Solomon understood that knowing principles is not enough. One must live under them. The biblical narrative shows that the fear of the Lord functions as an axis, keeping the heart aligned even under pressure. Where reverence exists, healthy boundaries are formed. Where it does not, everything becomes negotiable. This fear does not paralyze, it guides. The Bible reveals that those who fear God walk with greater security because they know who directs their steps. Solomon wrote Proverbs to teach that a full life is not accidental, but the result of conscious obedience. To fear God is to live with spiritual awareness. It is to walk, knowing that every choice carries eternal weight. The biblical story shows that the fear of the Lord protects the heart from arrogance. Solomon learned that intelligence without reverence breeds pride. Scripture teaches that fear keeps human beings in their proper place before God in life. When this reverence is lost, wisdom is emptied. Fulfillment, therefore, is not emotional intensity, but spiritual alignment. This understanding leads to an inevitable conclusion about the purpose of existence. The Bible shows that after experiencing everything, Solomon arrived at a final synthesis. And it is this synthesis that reveals the last and most decisive lesson. The 10th lesson we learn about Solomon is that the ultimate purpose of life is to obey God. After walking through power, pleasure, wisdom, and achievement, the biblical story culminates in a clear and direct declaration. It is written, "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." Book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 13. Nothing is more essential than this. The Bible shows that this conclusion is not born from theory, but from lived experience. Solomon does not write as someone detached from reality, but as one who walked every possible path. Obedience emerges as the only way that sustains life from beginning to end. When God is obeyed, the heart finds rest. Outside of this, everything becomes striving. Obeying God does not mean a life without difficulties, but a life filled with meaning. The biblical story teaches that a life aligned with God can face suffering without losing purpose. Solomon understood that human expectations change, applause fades, and achievements pass, but obedience remains as an anchor. It provides direction when circumstances shift. Scripture reveals that living to please God frees the heart from slavery to human opinions. Solomon concludes that the value of life is not found in impressing people, but in being faithful to God. When this truth is internalized, life gains both simplicity and depth, less anxiety, greater clarity. This conclusion from Solomon closes the biblical story with a direct call to the heart. If everything converges toward obeying God, then every choice matters. The Bible leads the reader to realize that the meaning of life is not in seeking more, but in living better before God. And from this understanding arises the final challenge. What will be done in practice with everything that has been learned? After walking through this entire biblical journey, it is impossible to remain the same. The life of Solomon, recorded so honestly in the Bible, acts as a spiritual mirror. It reveals achievements that inspire and failures that warn. Wisdom asked of God, a divided heart, empty success, fleeting pleasure, spiritual responsibility, and finally, the true meaning of life. Everything converges into a quiet yet powerful question. Where does God truly stand in your daily decisions? This text is not only about Solomon, it is about you, about small choices that shape great destinies, about priorities that, when misplaced, create emptiness, even in the midst of achievement. The Bible shows that it is not enough to start well. One must remain faithful. It is not enough to know what is right. One must live what is right. The biblical story calls us to a practical, conscious, and consistent faith. Now the reflection rests in your heart. Which of these lessons spoke most deeply to you? Was it the need to ask God for wisdom? The warning against a divided heart? The emptiness of human achievements? Or the understanding that the true purpose of life is to fear and obey God? Consider this honestly, because what confronts us the most is often what needs our attention the most. If this content helped you, challenged you, or drew you closer to God, do not stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue growing through deep, biblical, and life-transforming teaching. And now, share in the comments. Which lesson spoke most to your heart today? That answer may be the first step toward real change in your life.